I'm going to turn my camera off while I finish my...
Mr. Chair, we are now live.
Thank you so much, and welcome to the General Government Committee. As this is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website, all members and staff in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout this meeting. I now call this meeting to order. And we will start with the land acknowledgement. We'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788, and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support, truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Okay, so with that said, back here, just bear with me. Okay, so we need to know, first of all, I should let everyone know that Ward 3 Councillor Lisa Bauer sends her regrets. Her daughter is graduating today. So congratulations to her daughter. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest from any member of council? I don't see any there, which is good. And next we have adoption of the minutes. Item 3.1, regular meeting May 9th, 2022. Can I have a mover? Moved by Mayor Collier. All in favor? That carries. I should have asked if there was any questions. 3.2 is the next closed session meeting May 9th, 2022. Are there any questions on that? Okay, can I have a mover for that, please? Regional Councillor Lee. All in favor? That motion carries. And on to the consent agenda. We have a number of items that have been pulled. So 4.1, 4.2, 4.4, 4.8 have all been pulled on the consent agenda. Can I have a mover for the balance of the consent agenda? Councillor Khan, thank you so much. All in favor on the balance of the agenda? Thank you, that carries. Okay, so first up we have Regional Councillor Crawford, who has pulled 4.1, Government Relations Update. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for this report from CAO Baker and from Samantha. My question is around not necessarily the motions that we have had results from, but the fact that we now have a new MPP in Ajax. Some of the motions, how do we address, or do we ever get an update on the outstanding motions? So a couple that I was thinking about was, I think we had put a motion, Councillor Bauer and myself, on construction time, and the fact that we asked it to go back to the way it was pre-pandemic. I don't know if that ever happened at all. I never heard anything on that one. I'm just curious, do we send the outstanding ones to our new MPP, or do they just kind of, especially with the end of the term coming up, do they just fizzle out? I've never been part of a council that has been so active with motions. And so I'm just curious as to what the status of these will be moving forward.
So I'm not sure if Christy's on the line.
Hi there, Sam is here. This is Samantha. Through the chair, thank you for that question, Regional Councillor Crawford. We will be setting up a meeting to discuss with the new MPP, and we'll be in regular communications with them about issues that arise from council motions. But we'll also be looking back at the motions from the past that you've brought up.
Okay, when would we have, would you just be updating us on a kind of per motion basis? Or do we get kind of an update on that? Again, I've not been part of a council that's been so active when it comes to motions, so I'm just curious as to what that process would look like.
Through the chair, GR issues are ongoing and evolving pretty regularly, and some things take quite some time to work through. But we will have regular meetings and the motion tracker set up to follow what reports or what might come of the motions that council has passed to see if there's been movement on them.
Okay, thank you. I'll move it when it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other questions on 4.1 from any member of council? I don't think, I'm just struggling. Oh, sorry, Regional Councillor Lee. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, just kind of piggybacking on Regional Councillor Crawford's line of questioning, is it possible to get a more robust tracker? So the way, this is kind of inside baseball, but generally, Council received, I think, like 2 versions of the tracker, each with like a huge chunk of them. And is there a way we can ongoing, because knock on wood, this council returns next term, I think we'll be just as active in terms of policy. And I was wondering, is it possible to get a more robust version of the tracker that we can track real time, including, amendments at GDC, amendments at CAP? I think it's really important to ensure that we can follow up ourselves on things that may have passed, may have failed, etc. Is that a possibility, Ms. Patterson?
Through the chair, it's Christy here. I'm taking this one for Sam. We set up the current motion tracker with the support of LIS. So any future discussion on that, we would have to talk with them about their capacity and what our capacity is. I know that you and I have had some discussions about how we can expand that tracker as well. So I think that going into the new term presents a great an opportunity to review that function and what we can do better and improve on it.
Okay, that is appreciated. So following up on Regional Councillor Crawford's questions about the letters, a lot of times we'll send letters advocating for various causes, whether it's autism, the bike racks, etc. Is there an equivalent of like an RSVP for like political letters per se, where it's like we kind of ask for a response, even if it's a form response? I think our constituents would feel a lot better knowing that we pursued a question from our next level of government and they responded in kind.
So further to that, again, we have no current tracker for letters. So just like our constituent request, and now the motion tracker, if council would like staff in the office to track the letters, we can do that as well and ensure that we do get some sort of response. And that would be initiated sometime in the new term, though.
Great. No, of course. And obviously, it won't be done right away. That said, I appreciate the answers to the questions, and I'm looking forward to the future council and our political agenda, so to speak. So thank you, Chair.
Very good. Are there any other questions on 4.1? I'll just add that I concur with my council colleagues wholeheartedly. I would love to see some sort of regular pattern so we could, keep track of things and not get lost. Okay, so I need a mover for that, and Regional Councillor Crawford is moving it. So all in favor for item 4.1, that carries. Thank you so much. We are now on to 4.2 that was pulled by our mayor. Mayor Collier, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Valentin or staff. I'm glad to see this coming forward. We made the decision to go ahead with an investment policy in November 2021. We're now in June of 2022. The rate of return was it 1.3 million on 158 million worth of investment, which is, I didn't do the math as a percentage, but let's just do it quickly. 1.3 divided by 158 is 0.8% rate of return. Where is our money now going forward, now that Council made the decision in November, recognizing that the year was almost over? So obviously It just has sat in bank accounts throughout the year. It's June now, halfway through the year almost. Where is the money today? And what are the plans for the balance of this year based on our new investment policy, please?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, thank you for the question. So you're correct, we did bring forward an investment policy where we now have expanded and will be looking to invest in equities. At this point, because of the uncertainty with when Pickering had identified perhaps selling its shares in a Lexicon, we didn't want to tie up our funds just in case of an opportunity that came forward. So currently we have our money invested in the bank, in some GICs, as well as some high interest savings accounts. So we have them all currently in short-term investments.
Are those the GICs that had not yet secured? We haven't entered into any new GICs, right?
Yes, we have very short-term ones though.
Why are we doing that when I think this council gave a pretty clear direction that we weren't doing GICs anymore? I think we gave direction last year to not renew any GICs.
Through the chair, it was my understanding through when the new investment policy came forward that we had the opportunity to look at whatever mechanisms, including GICs. So that's included in our investment policy right now.
So of the, okay, I'm going to have to review that because I respectfully disagree, but of the $158 million that we have in cash, how much of that is outside of the 5-year time frame as far as our capital and operating?
Sorry, through the chair, sorry, I'm not sure I quite understand. How much is identified outside of the 5-year?
We have $158 million. Right. Approximately, give or take. We receive $78 million a year in tax revenue. We have other revenues from rec centers and Lexicon and whatever else, which makes up our operating. Of the $158 million that we have currently in reserves, how much of that are we going to need in the next 5 years?
Well, through the chair, that will depend on our capital program. So there's a significant amount of that balance that's in development charges. There's a significant amount that's federal gas tax. So they're all restricted funds. So we can't invest them all together anyway. We have to invest them separately. And depending on what our long range capital forecast stipulates, that one of the question marks is Hunt Street, some of our Roslyn Road, there's large expenditures there. So from a development charge perspective, we can't really tie up those funds at this point.
So they are 5 years or less. My question is, based on our policy that this council approved in November 2021, how much can we invest in anything other than GICs going forward based on our policy? Of the 158 million, how much is needed now to satisfy all the things you just said? And how much can be invested in growth type product or a mix as per our policy?
Through the chair, I don't have that figure in front of me, unfortunately. I can look into that and provide you with an answer. Again, with the uncertainty of a Lexicon, we were just trying to keep our options open. So we were trying not to invest long-term in all of our funds.
And I understand that. However, we're in an environment of 6.7, I believe it is, inflation. Okay, so when we make 0.8% on our investments, and guaranteed the banks aren't paying more than 1% on our savings accounts right now, we are actually losing, in effect, 5.7% per year right now doing what we're doing. I will concede that markets have gone down so far this year because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the price of oil and others have caused all sorts of weird things to happen. But now Pickering's made a decision they're not going to do anything till the fall. And I think it's a mistake and an injustice to the residents of Ajax, the taxpayers. We have a lot of pressures on our capital budget that we all know of. We've got 4 new plans, the fire master plan, the sewer or stormwater, the asset management, and I think there's another one I can't think of, that we know we need to make better use of these reserves. Going 5% plus minus each year, to me, is not an option. knowing markets are down right now, my thought is we get that money invested and we don't worry about what ifs like a lexicon and that. And if we do, we make that decision at the time. But having 158,000, all of it sitting in short term right now is a mistake and contrary to our investment policy this council has approved. So my question again that I asked originally is, what is the plan going forward to follow our investment policy? Because going minus 5+% each year is not an option.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we can definitely look at this, and if there's no immediate, if we'll review the funds that we have outside of that 5-year term, and we can look to put those in equities if that's what council desires.
Well, I want to follow the investment policy this council approved 8 months ago. And that's why we did it. We recognize that we have pressures that we're not going to be able to reach on our capital programs. We're just not. It's financially impossible. We saw numbers based on that if we did nothing, we would run out of money in 10 years based on our capital budget that we did last year. Those are factual numbers that we were given, and I think I made that comment. Now, granted, we're never going to do that. You're not going to let us do that as a treasurer, but we need to really be not going minus 5% each year. We need to going plus 5 or 6% each year. Even if we'd only made 2% on that $158 million, we would have almost tripled the 1.3 million we made, leaving it sitting in bank accounts. And I'm very concerned that we've now, even though it's short term, gone back into GICs. GICs are the bank's most profitable product. And they're in business to make money for themselves, plain and simple, at the expense of people that invest in them. Whereas if we'd gone with equities, which again is probably 90% buying shares in the banks, we would be well ahead by now. And that's what our policy that this council has adopted is. So now that we've gone 6 months into the year, I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just making a statement that I think we need to be following the policy. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. We can look at revising it. But I don't think the mix of assets that the consultant gave us that we adopted is very aggressive at all. It's a pretty low mix. I think 40% or so of equity, which is mostly common bank shares. And then I think about the same amount in bonds or something like that. And that is a pretty conservative approach. But again, this council's given direction. So how long will it take for you to look at and identify how much of the 158 million we have is needed in the next 5 years, and how much is 5 years or more that can ride out a bit of volatility and we can get working for us?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, CEO Baker, did you want to speak on this, sir?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. To your question of the treasurer, I think I would like to hear, when Diane thinks. I think the treasurer can let you know before next council meeting as to how much of the money is committed over the next 3 years, at least of the capital budget, or 5 years, whatever you like. Okay. I think to her point, I think finance staff have been very responsible recently with the call of Pickering to be selling their shares. All municipalities, shareholders are none of us have been through this situation before, and we need to make sure we're liquid enough to be able to purchase shares if council so decides to do so. So I think that they've been responsible in their decision making, and the decision, we still need to confirm if that's actually the case, that Pickering's not going to sell it, but we've heard that that's the case, at least until the fall. But I think that finance has been trying to be as responsible as possible and make sure that we're able to act on that if and when it becomes available.
Understood. But Mr. Baker and perhaps Ms. Valentin, if we had the money in one investment, what is the time frame to get that money out if we decided, regardless whether it's an equity or a bond, what type of portfolio it's in? It's about a week, right?
And through the chair, it's quite a short-term turnaround, within a week, yes.
Okay, so we're not locked in like we would be a GIC longer term. I mean, a GIC, you're probably in more than 30-day GICs, aren't you?
Through the chair, we had actually got some cashable GICs that we are sitting on. We've also invested in a high interest savings account. We've actually got a very good rate right now. There was a special rate of 3% that came out. So we've taken advantage of those as well. If I can speak to the amount that was earned last year, although we ended the year with $158 million in cash, that number fluctuated over the year. So, and we know that there was significantly low interest rates at that time. So they are starting to move up a little bit. We are looking at different options. We've renegotiated some terms with the bank, but we will be also looking at the one investment equities portfolio, and we'll look to see what those balances that we can invest will be.
Okay, so you'll be able to report back at the June 20th council meeting with just an update on those amounts.
Sure.
Okay. Those are my questions, Chair. This is just received for information, so I'm fine to move it if you need a mover.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any other questions? Regional Councillor Lee, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the mayor's pretty much covered a lot of it, but I think this has been something he's been speaking about since year one, of our term, and now we're at year 4. We finally got, legislation passed regarding from an Ajax point of view. So I tend to agree with the mayor, though I also understand the finance is going to be very conservative with our money. That ultimately, I perhaps can't hurt for us to look at the opportunity of exploring, taking some of these liquid funds we have and like trying a test balloon of just, to the mayor's point, playing, bonds, equities, or whatever, just to see if it'll outperform whatever our current investment strategy is over a 6-month, 1-year point. And then we can actually see, over 1 year, whether, the mayor's financial advice is sound or whether finance playing conservative is sound. But I think ultimately we keep kind of pushing the markers, so to speak, to make this decision. So I'm looking forward to the report on the 20th because I'm also very eager to, try different methods of making revenue for the town. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on item 4.2 from any member of council? I don't see any. The mover for that is Mayor Collier. All in favor? Okay, thank you so much. That passes. 4.3 was already done. Next up, we have 4.4, Canada Community Building Fund Annual Report, and Mayor Collier has pulled that. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Just let me pull that up here. I believe, sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that the my question was, we have 10 million currently not committed. Is that accurate, Ms. Valentin? Give or take, like 9.7.
Through the chair, I believe Julie Meppin is also on the line, but yes, that's probably the amount that we have in our reserves that is identified through our capital budget.
Okay, and sorry, it's actually 10.3. Is there a timeline that we have to use those funds by?
Through the chair, yes, we are required to use the funds within 5 years of receipt. So we do track that.
Okay, and we've had 2 years where the government has doubled up on the gas tax. Mm-hmm. So we've had a bit of a windfall there. And I'd be surprised if they didn't do it again this year, given the high price of fuel and the fact they're collecting many multiples of what they thought they were going to be collecting in the gas tax. So where I'm going with this is we have these funds sitting there, but we also have, like you've said, for future capital projects. Do you have any large capital projects in mind right now for next year that are currently unfunded that we could use this for?
Through the chair, I'm not off the top of my mind. That I would have to discuss with the department heads, but we do have several master plans that have not all of the projects haven't been identified yet. As you'll see today, the Parks Master Plan is coming through as well, items for the Fire Master Plan. So we do have eligibility criteria that we have to follow to use these funds. We have identified that they have to be capital in nature. We use it for over 100,000, typically for projects greater than 100,000, because there's a lot of administration that goes along with using those funds. But we do try, it is something that we must use within the 5 years, and we are cognizant of that, and we try and use it as best as we can every year.
So we have basically 3 years left to use those funds.
Through the chair. No, this is a rolling total. So the money comes in, like we've spent over $5 million last year. I believe it was over $4 million the year before. So we would look to see what projects, are available. We try to use as much as possible every year.
Okay. And you jumped ahead to one of my future questions, and that is the Recreation Master Plan. And I do have some suggestions for that 10 million. So I'll leave it there. Again, if you need, this is a receipt for information. If you need a mover, I will make that motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any other questions on item 4.4? There being none, moved by Mayor Collier, and all in favor? That carries. Thank you so much. Next, we have 4.8, which is Town of Ajax separation from AMHC. Regional Councillor Crawford has pulled it, as well as Mayor Collier. Marilyn Crawford, you have the floor. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. My question on this has been a very long process. And I'm glad to see that we've finally come to a point where that we're comfortable with this process. My question is really around, I guess, the responsibilities for Councillor Tyler Morin and myself at this point. Do we fulfill this position till the end of June or into the summer, or how does this? Where is our responsibilities at this point?
Sure. Thank you for that question. Through the chair. So yourself and Councillor Tyler Morin are still members of the board, so you will remain on the board for the remainder of this term as long as you hold elected office. And then when the new council term begins, council as a whole will decide who its appointees to the AMHC board are. But I expect at that point it'll be just for a very short amount of time. As in the report, I'd indicated that we expect completion of the separation process to take about 6 to 12 months, depending on when we can get to the region for the necessary approvals. So I think the town will still have active and engaged representation on that board until such a time that the process is complete. And of course, there may be sort of the hiccup of the election and some changes that arise from that, but we will still be actively engaged until the separation is complete.
Okay. I just want to say that I felt like the AGM went really well. I also felt like we have a very strong board going into this process. And I've been really impressed with the current board. And I feel like we're leaving AMHC and the residents that are part of this in really good hands. So I just wanted to say that publicly. And thank you for answering my question.
Thank you so much. Mayor Collier, you have pulled this item as well.
Actually, I don't need to ask any questions on this, Councillor Tyler Morin. My question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So for 4.4, can I get a mover for that? Regional Councillor Crawford, has moved it. And all in favor? Thank you so much. That carries. Next up, we have 4.8, I believe, Town of Ajax separation from me, but we just did that. I believe we're done the agenda items. I'm ahead of myself here. Now we're on to discussion, and we had Councillor Khan, my friend Councillor Khan, pull 5.1, cricket site improvement strategy. Councillor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Is it Mr. Meredith? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're directing this to Director Meredith.
Is it him that I ask questions to?
There's, through the chair to Councillor Khan, there's myself and also Lindsay Sinclair and Andrew Jackson, who are involved and have been involved on a more day-to-day basis on the design concepts that have been developed to date. So ask your questions, and I'll ask Lindsay or Andrew to chime in sort of as the questions.
Wonderful. Good to see you, Dave. So listen, the last time we looked at this report, I was seeing we were going to repair the clubhouse, and it's looking to, according to the report, to be a fully new build. Could you explain a bit into that? How come we got to that decision instead?
So I can start, and then if Lindsay wishes to add any additional comments, then I would welcome those as well. But initially, when we did look into sort of the costing of sort of a refurbishment of the existing clubhouse, what we do is a designated substance survey to look at any substances such as mold. We had a structural assessment done, just looking at the facility itself. And what we did is we completed sort of a bit of a cost benefit analysis in terms of what's in the best interest of the town long term. And in all honesty, when we did sort of a costing of the two scenarios, it was as cost efficient to build a new building than it was to renovate the existing clubhouse. And when we look at the benefits of the aesthetics that it will improve and how it will directly serve the cricket members and those participants, we feel that, sort of this is the right approach to take. So we did have a lot of internal discussion and commentary on that. And I'm not sure, Lindsay, whether there's anything else that you would like to add to that.
Hi, Dave. No, that sounds great. You summarized it well.
Okay.
Okay, great. Next question. I remember when we were having these funds allocated, we raised about 3.2 million from federal, provincial, and from local grants. 3.2 million. I see on page 80, available budget 4,083,000. Like, where did the other 800,000 come from? Page 80, available budget. Anyone?
Yep. Sorry, Lindsay, do you have any comment on that at this?
Sure. Through the chair, yeah, the approved capital budget for this project, it's at the top of the financial implications section. It is 3.181 and 800 is the total capital budget for this whole project. Correct.
Right, but I see it says available budget is 4 million.
At the very bottom, that's $4,000. That is the estimated remainder available after the current cost estimates for yes.
Okay, wonderful. Current cricket season 2022, are they going to be able to play? And with that question as well, what's the current status of the contract the Ajax Cricket Club has with the town of Ajax? Shouldn't that be expired by now, that 30 years?
So a couple of things. First of all, yeah, the intent from a timing standpoint, the intent of this report was really to provide an update to council from an information perspective. Our plan is to award it during the recess period in July or August of this year, but we didn't want to just award it without council sort of having up-to-date information in terms of where it's at. So the intent of this report is really to give you a current snapshot of where we're at, knowing we're at the stage where we're going to be initiating the tender very soon and probably be awarding the contract in July, August for a fall start of construction. So it will allow the cricket season to complete this year in the 2022 season, try and minimize the disruption in the season. And we've been in contact with the various permit holders not only the Ajax Cricket Club, but other permit holders that are permitting the field this year. So that's really the purpose of this meeting, was from a timing perspective. And sorry, the second part of your question?
The contract that the Ajax Cricket Club has with the town for the land.
So there is no longer a contract or a lease agreement with the town of Ajax that was terminated a couple of years ago. So the Ajax Cricket Club is a primary permit holder or community group, just like others, just like Spartans baseball, Ajax minor soccer, Ajax minor hockey. So they're a key user group that permits a large percentage of the available time, but it is open, and we are working with new and emerging cricket groups sort of within the town of Ajax who are hoping to gain access to the fields as well. So there's no exclusive use.
Right, good. Just want to know, because we get a lot of noise from other groups that they don't have access to the cricket club. But on that note, though, I just want to let you know that the Ajax Cricket Club are the current York Region champions, and they've done very well. They've kept our flag flying very proudly. So thank you for that. And just to let you know, the illustrations are gorgeous. It looks like a town property. I'm happy to see the renditions of what the new Ajax Cricket Club is going to look like. So thank you, Mr. Meredith and team, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Are there any other questions on this item? There being none, I too am very glad to see the cricket site improvements coming to fruition. I know it's a passion for many of our residents, and it's a happy thing. There being none, can I get a mover for 5.1? I'm going to go with Councillor Khan on this one. Oh, sorry, Regional Councillor Dice, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one. And I'm really pleased to see that a new building's going up. I'm not surprised that we weren't able to retrofit the other one. And I think it's well deserving because, you know, cricket's very, very popular. It's taken time, and it's all of a sudden one of the most sought after sports in Ajax, and we really need this facility. And I see from the rendition of the new building, it's still in the same, the building's going to be in the same place. Is that correct? Sort of kitty corner.
Yeah, it's a slightly smaller footprint, but it's in the same general area, yes.
So is there any way, because it's such a busy intersection there at the four corners, is there any way we can also put the name on the back of the building? Just sort of, it gives it a little more prominence and helps people find it as well. Because I see that the name is on the side of of one of the elevation drawings.
Yeah, so that is something that we have discussed in terms of, because it does sort of have that dual frontage. Yeah, we will look at ways to address it on both those elevations.
Okay, that'd be great. Looks good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions on this item? There being none, back to Councillor Khan as the mover. Thank you so much, sir. All in favor of that? Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands. That carries. Thank you so much. Next up, we have presentations for the Recreation Parks Master Plan, and that was pulled by Councillor Khan as well. Councillor, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, but there is another discussion item on the agenda, 5.2, accommodation strategy.
I completely forgot that, and it's right there. So accommodation strategy 5.2, although I don't have any polls, but how do you want to proceed, Sarah? Sorry. How do you want to proceed?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair, if you like.
Oh, we just haven't moved it because it was not part of the consent agenda. Got it. I'll get a mover, which is, do you have a question on that, Regional Councillor Crawford? Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I had needed, I wasn't sure if I needed to let you know I had a question on this. I'm not sure. I thought there was some sort of presentation, obviously not.
Right. Okay.
So from the accommodation point of view, I'm just curious about, has there been any looking at the councillor's office? I know some councillors do use the office. I'm not one that's in the office as much, and with COVID, pretty much have set myself up at home. Is there some thought around maybe making our situation more permanent at home and less at the office, and being able to utilize those offices for other staff? I didn't see that in the report. Maybe you were too afraid to put it in, but just curious, because it seems like we don't spend, at least I speak for myself. I don't spend a lot of time in my office. So wondering if maybe I could be wrong. Maybe other people do. So just a question on that.
Do we know who can answer that? Regional Councillor Crawford's question.
Through the chair, it's Cass, and Lindsay might have some additional insights here, but thank you very much to Regional Councillor Crawford for the question. This is something that, is definitely open for discussion, and that's one of the first steps that will be taken, upon the conclusion of this meeting is the individual meetings with that operations will be having with each of the affected departments, which will include conversations between Lindsay and Director Meredith with CAO Baker, just to discuss about what the vision for the kind of footprint of the Office of the CAO will look like and what is feasible within the budget that we have. So I think if that's, that feedback is important and will be taken into consideration. And, even through additional conversations, if there's other councillors, that would like to speak to Shane directly about what, their thoughts are about use of their office. I think that's something we'd welcome as we go down this, but I'll defer to Shane for a bit more clarity if he'd like to chime in.
Thanks, Cass. Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, that's a really good point, Regional Councillor Crawford. I wouldn't say that they were scared to put it in the report, but it was, I actually laughed out loud and woke the dog up. But I think that it hadn't even occurred to me that some of the councillors might be interested in some different type of accommodation. So absolutely, we'll make that part of the discussions and when we're talking to the individual departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm not speaking on behalf of council. It's just an idea. Maybe I'm off base on this one, but I was just curious because I would hate to have to spend a lot of extra money, anyway, I'm not speaking on behalf of council. It's just a question.
Nothing wrong with the question. Okay. Any further questions on 5.2, the accommodation strategy? There is. Regional Councillor Lee, you have the floor.
Chair, so I'm kind of torn because ultimately we've proven the past 2 years that we can actually have a lot of staff work from home and our municipality can actually run pretty adequately. And I just I question the use of money at this time of the year. The report was pretty comprehensive. I just want to make sure it's not we're not investing in just a facelift and that ultimately we'll be using this money to really explore different, how officing accommodation options. A good example is also council chambers. There's that entire room, or I think series of rooms behind council chambers that never get used that, council could always work out of there as an example. So it is, not an inconsequential amount of money. And, I'm reticent to really explore that, but at the end of the day, I do see the need for it. So my hope, this is more just a comment than a question, is that, we do find unique ways and hopefully we continue exploring work from home options, because I think, we're going to find that this is the way a lot of organizations are heading, both for, optimization as well as, employee satisfaction as well. So just about that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions on item number 4.2, accommodation strategy? Can I get a mover for that item?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Regional Councillor Crawford. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. That brings us to presentations. And we have are we moving on to 6.1 for presentations, new corporate giving program proposal? Yes. Standing by.
Through the chair, thank you very much. I'll just be sharing preparing to share my screen here.
We need the Jeopardy music.
how does that look? Can everybody see my screen, the perennial question?
I certainly can. Looks good.
All right, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of council. Thank you very much for having me here today. For those watching from home, my name is Cass Cruciano, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Grants, Partnerships, and Strategic Initiatives in the Office of the CAO. Today, I'll be presenting a proposal for a renewed vision for the corporate giving portfolio here at the town. I know this is of keen interest to members of council, as well as to the community organizations that have depended on the financial and in-kind support from the town over the past 15 years or so. For this presentation, I will walk everybody through some background on how we got to where we are today, what the new program will look like, and the next steps that we need to take to make this program a reality. So when the Slots at Racetracks program was brought to Ajax in 2006, the host municipality agreement that the town signed with the OLG contained a clause that required the town to reinvest a portion of the funds we received from the slots into a community program of some kind, a community giving program of some kind. Now, at that time, the town did not have its own resources to run its own community granting program. So funds were allocated to the Ajax Community Fund, which was a sort of offshoot of the Durham Community Fund. So the town made an annual contribution that was split, with about half of that going to the Ajax Community Fund that was dispersed each year to community organizations, and the other half going into the Durham Community Fund's Endowment Fund, which was an investment account that is intended for the sort of long-term sustainability of their community giving program. Then the town, as everybody knows, launched the Impact Ajax program with the intent of providing resources and supports to the community, but also with the understanding that these funds would be given to community organizations that were different than those that received funds through the Ajax Community Fund. From there, there was the annual allocation to the Ajax Pickering Hospital that was approved by council and issued each year. However, with the onset of COVID, municipalities were tasked with the very difficult reality of managing their budgets in an incredibly uncertain climate. So at that time, for the 2021 operating budget, council did direct the pause of the Impact Ajax program, the disbursement to the Durham Community Foundation, and to the Ajax Pickering Hospital. Staff then used this opportunity to revisit the program and find the opportunities to improve it. So as part of that, I'll also mention that the sort of review of the Impact Ajax program was included in the strategic plan and was identified as a recommendation in the Recreation, Culture, and Community Development Core Services Review that was completed by the Office of the CAO in 2021. So after the community giving grants were put on hold, staff in the Office of the CAO reviewed all of the ways that the town invests in their community. What we found was, to put it frankly, somewhat disorganization and duplication of efforts. Recipients of the Ajax Community Fund were also receiving funds through Impact Ajax. Now, that would be for different programs and certainly not malicious intent on the community organization's part. But we did find that this was perhaps not the most effective use of the town's resources. We discovered there, were standalone funding agreements for services like we have with Para Rescue Services and Roadwatch that exist in different departments. We have long-standing arrangements with community organizations like the Probus groups and the Lions clubs to use our facilities for in-kind or discounted rates. And these aren't being comprehensively tracked in one centralized place. We know the application process for Impact. We heard from community organizations that this was lengthy and intensive for community groups, and the review process internally involved many hours of staff time. There were limitations on how funding could be used and what projects could be funded. And ultimately, these investments were being put towards relatively small scale initiatives. And if you look at the total here, we can see that that's a big number. That's
$317,000, and potentially more when you take into consideration the in-kind contributions that are made across the town. And that number isn't being celebrated or wasn't being celebrated the way that we really should. That's a number that council and staff and all of our departments should be proud of. But we weren't promoting it the way that we really, that we could be. So over the past year, staff in Public and Strategic Affairs have undertaken some reviews of, the way that other municipalities and public sector organizations and private sector organizations give out their funding. So we looked at other municipalities like Brampton, who has a very comprehensive, large dollar figure community giving program. We looked at Whitby, that's right next door. We looked at Alexicon and Toronto Hydro, the way that they give funds out. And, we used our own experience with the way that we, our experience with provincial and federal granting programs. Our application experience, the review process there. We, with the support of all the departments, we've reviewed, our history of community giving and the investments we've made, agreements that we have, relationships that exist. And so the proposal that we're presenting to council today has been developed with input from our colleagues in all departments, but I will give a special shout out to Recreation and Finance for their support in the development of this project or new proposal. So what we're proposing today is bundling all of our existing corporate giving, so that $317,000 or more dollar figure, into a $1 million program per term of council. So that's $250,000 per year that will be funded through the slot revenues, all through a new corporate granting reserve. This will include 4 funding tiers from $2,500 to $100,000 per year, with the flexibility built in to fund in-year requests, multi-year partnerships, and some kind of cool new things that, our programs didn't allow us to do before. And ultimately, this represents over $65,000 in annual savings and will result in a more comprehensive tracking of all of our in-kind contributions, whether that's Mr. Chair, is there a question? Oh, wait to the end. Okay.
I apologize. I was just acknowledging somebody who wants to ask a question, as you were. Sorry, my mistake.
Thank you. No problem. So with the new program, there's obviously some objectives that we have that we had to keep in mind when we were developing it. So we know that the needs of our communities are ever changing, and the role of municipalities are as well. So in the shift in philosophy for approaching partnerships, I know that council knows that we have community partners and organizations that have these really great ideas to better the community, really cool initiatives and programs, events, capital investments, but they don't have the money to do so. And we as a town, and council yourselves, have big ideas to better the community, but this town lacks resources like time, capacity, and expertise in some cases to complete. So the goal of this program is to really allow those cool things to happen and create an avenue where that's possible. There's also the desire to ease the administrative burden and streamline the process, and that's for both the applicants and for staff internally that are doing the back end work of reviewing and intaking processes, the financial reporting and disbursements and audit components and all of those pieces. So we also want to create more accessible, unique funding opportunities, like I mentioned, and I'll speak a little bit shortly about how we're looking to broaden the eligibility. We want to increase accountability and transparency in the decision-making process by increasing council's involvement and ultimately having you guys make the final decision. And then lastly, that focus on funding projects that meet our corporate and strategic objectives. We have a lot of strategies and action plans that get completed and get updated every few years. And a lot of them have action items that are in them. But by curating a list of those action items and projects that we'd love to complete and we know we need to complete, but maybe we don't have the resources to do it ourselves, we can ask our partners in the community that are better equipped to do that work for us, and they can do it through this program. So these are some examples of the program eligibility. So at a very high level, these kind of 6 key points, we're looking to have any prospective partner or applicant meet at least 4 of these. So you have to be an Ajax or provide service to Ajax residents. You have to offer significant benefits. You have to have a clear alignment with our goals and priorities. You have to be accessible and welcoming to the public. You have to provide meaningful avenues for town recognition and partnerships, which I think traditionally, we've been okay with a logo on a flyer, but maybe we want something a little bit more involved or engaging than that. And then, of course, that, they wouldn't be affiliated with organizations that don't align with our values or, perhaps would otherwise be ineligible. Previous iterations of the town's corporate giving have been limited to not-for-profit or charitable organizations. But with the kind of ever-evolving landscape that we live in with partnerships, we really didn't want to limit ourselves. And so we're proposing that this new program be opened up to unorganized organizations, for-profit entities, and at times where it makes sense, community organizations, and of course, charities and not-for-profits remaining eligible. And the other piece is previously our eligible expenses were limited to program-specific, generally operating-based costs. But we'd like to expand that into more capital costs. So if there's an organization that maybe needs some funds to buy laptops for a program that they're doing, we don't want to say no to that. We want to have a process in place where we can say yes as much as possible, of course, within reason. So I'll walk you through some of the quick examples of what the funding tiers could look like using some real world examples. So, tier 1 in 1 year, we'd like to fund 20 projects up to about $2,500 each. And I'll use an example of a Black History Month celebration that, we included for, that would include some digital advertising, some in-kind, some support, some refreshments. And you'll see this is the annual budget versus what it would look like over the 4-year term of council. For tier 2, this is where the project dollar is a bit bigger. So we're looking to fund about 10 projects per year that are up to about $5,000. So this is a tree planting partnership, and one that, council might be familiar with that we did recently with the TRCA and the Hindu Federation. So this, included the town purchased the shrubs for planting directly from the TRCA, and we provided the in-kind rental of the picnic shelter and the staff time that took to coordinate those pieces. So tracking that staff time, paying the organizations directly for a capital investment is an example here. Tier 3 is a bit of a larger figure. So this is where, we'd fund up to $10,000 for a project and do about 5 per year. 5 per year is the goal. So Halal Fest being an example. So this is an organization, Night Market, that has done large events in Peel region. And they approached the town looking for some large space to hold a food truck festival. Now, the town lacked the actual space to accommodate this, but Metrolinx was available. And Metrolinx does have a cost to use the parking lot space. So the town agreed to pay the $8,700 that it would cost to do that. And so a project like this is an example of how we could potentially spend up to $10,000 for something in the community. And then the last one is similar to the $125,000 allocation that the hospital traditionally received from the town. So this is, kind of a one big guy per year, for example. So if the hospital had a big ask and it was $100,000 and they needed, some laparoscopic surgical equipment, this would be the mechanism that we could fund that through. But it wouldn't just be limited to the hospital. It would be any large scale project that we were approached to do that we wanted to consider. So overall, this is a general kind of overview of the process. So it talks about, an annual call for proposals, which would include both open, so any community organization can apply for any project, event, or initiative that they want, and targeted, which is where the town would include a list of those strategic action items that we have an interest in completing. So Public and Strategic Affairs would review any of the applications that come in. We'd work with the affected departments because, of course, a lot of these asks will involve our partners in operations or recreation or what have you. And ultimately, the recommendation would be made to council for all of the projects for the following year. So an intake would happen in 2022. Council would approve the funds to be spent in 2023. And then, of course, because we know, especially in the early years of this program, that, you know, the community needs time to get used to this. And so we need a mechanism for in-year, because not everybody has the foresight to plan a whole year in advance, especially when we're launching a program like this right away. So anything up to $10,000 would be approved at the staff level and then reported to council. But anything over $10,000 would be brought to council on an ad hoc basis for your approval. So a key element of, you know, this kind of holistic tracking of our corporate giving and reporting on it publicly includes offering, you know, our indoor and outdoor facility bookings at no costs or discounted rates to community organizations. So this process is, you know, I'm sure council can appreciate, based on the number of requests that you yourselves receive. There's a lot that goes into this. And so we're working with staff to figure out the best way to manage this. But it will have that, you know, renewed importance on that centralized tracking of all of our in-kind. And that's not just a facility booking. That also includes if there's staff and operations that are being asked to help set up or take down garbages or set up and take down picnic shelters. We want to track that, and we want the community to know that that is staff time and that's value that the town is offering. And then again, the last point is just a general comment that any sports-specific in-kind requests, so requests from ringette or requests from soccer, those we'd like to remain with recreation or operations as much as possible to keep them community-focused. So another part of this proposal is seeking approval for the town to end its annual contribution to the Durham Community Fund and instead directly invest those funds into community organizations ourselves. So we recognize that the town has contributed to the growth of the Endowment Fund, that investment fund the Durham Community Foundation has. And so what we're recommending is that we renegotiate the terms to ensure that, you know, when the DCF does spend funds out of that endowment account, that it's in line with our expectations, but ultimately reallocating the funds that had previously gone to the DCF to now be directly invested by the town ourselves. Additionally, in my report with the recommendations, you will see that we are requesting the reallocation of the annual grant amount that's set aside in the 2022 or 2022 operating budget to the Office of the CAO. So that just means that the funds that we normally have in the budget for Impact, Hospital, DCF, they weren't allocated to any specific account in lieu of council's approval of this kind of renewed program. So that this is an administrative budget neutral request that would basically just allow the Office of the CAO and the town to continue to fund these interim partnership initiatives for the remainder of 2022. That's in line with what we're asking for today. So some of the things we've talked about already that have been funded. So earlier this year, council approved a grant to the Ajax Hospital for about $25,000. I mentioned the tree planting partnership with the TRCA and the Hindu Federation and the Black History Month event that was held at St. Francis earlier this year. So these are the kinds of programs that we'd like to fund until the new program is officially launched in the fall. So just to reiterate, I appreciate that this is a lot of information and a big change, admittedly, but just offering some reassurance that these kind of four big pieces here. So assessing applicants against a matrix to maximize value and minimize risk of financial impropriety for the town. We'll continue to do our due diligence and making sure that people are spending money on what they should have and what they committed to, requiring proof of insurance and not leaving ourselves open to liability as much as possible. And then also, again, ultimately providing support to community organizations and local businesses that enhance and complement the town. So these next steps here you'll see are the official recommendations that have been included in my report that basically authorize, based on what you've heard today, that staff be authorized to implement this program to launch in November 22 when the new term of council begins. And that would include a rebrand, that the corporate giving reserve policy be developed and brought forward just to obviously before the program launches, that budget neutral transfer of funds be approved, and that ultimately that staff that council authorized staff to begin those conversations with the Durham Community Foundation and our annual contribution and set the new terms for the legacy of our share of the fund. So with that, I'm happy to answer any of your questions, and thank you very much for your patience with the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cristiano, for your presentation. Much appreciated. First on the speakers list, I have Mayor Collier.
Hello, Ashmi. Hand speaking.
Ashmi Khan, mute your phone. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, and sorry, just before you start, I also have Regional Councillor Crawford on the list as well.
Okay, through you to Ms. Cristiano.
Joy.
The examples that you gave, saying if this is implemented, the 25.5 for the hospital, the 5,000 for the tree planting, and the other, are you saying that if we approve this today, those are going to be sort of retroactively included for this year?
Through the chair, yes, it would be more of an administrative change. So those funds that were approved, the 25.5 for the hospital through council, the 5 through our standard approval processes internally through purchasing. So it would just be allocating those funds as ultimately under this program for the year.
What about that food truck thing for 10 grand?
Through the chair, that would be included as well.
Okay, so anything that the CAO's office has funded so far this year would just be kind of grandfathered into this retroactively, should we approve it today?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. I'm wondering, with the Durham Community Fund, we've been funding that since 2006, and there's currently $500,000 in there. We haven't had, and the report speaks to this, a presentation. We used to get an annual report from them that tells us who they funded and how much from that endowment. Can you confirm that those endowments have still been being made, and how much per year that will continue to pay should we decide to pull out of it now? Because that money stays.
Through the chair, and so that the last update I believe that I had seen was in 2018, and that was the $500,000. But what we're asking today is that the funds that remain, we will just renegotiate to make sure that when they're dished out, that will be done. But we will need to talk to the Durham Community Foundation to better understand what that looks like moving forward when we stop the annual allocation each year moving forward.
Understood. Maybe I didn't ask it properly, but we have $500,000 in that endowment fund. And the whole point of an endowment fund is the principal is never touched, just the growth. So that 500 will always be 500. I guess what I'm asking for is reassurance that even, 4% per year they give out, whatever the growth is, that they maybe make $20,000, $25,000 a year in grants, that's going to continue, and that they're going to continue to report to us, even though they haven't in the last 4 years.
Through the chair, thank you, Mayor Collier. Those terms would absolutely be negotiated in the conversations with the DCF after this. So point taken, that making sure that what is funded from that moving forward continues to be reported is certainly one of our priorities.
Okay, and that they actually do report. I want that really locked in, please.
Through the chair, yes, I will add, and Treasurer Valentin might want to chime in on this, but I do believe that we haven't provided funding to them in, I think, last year and this year because of the hold on COVID. So they haven't actually received the funds.
Right, but as an endowment, they would still make grants on an annual basis.
Through the chair, that's correct. So any report that they bring back will include anything they funded that haven't been reported. We'll make sure it's retroactive to include it.
Okay, and I don't need them to come to council. Just to report to GGC as one of our annual updates is fine. To the hospital, I never really envisioned, I know when we made a decision in the first year of COVID to halt the grant because we'd lost the slots revenues. I don't think I had ever envisioned, I don't know how the rest of council feels, to stop our $500,000 support to the hospital per term of council. We did $125,000 a year times 4 each term of council. And I had always thought that that was going to continue. And you're saying now that will stop. They could apply for up to $100,000 for an individual project. I don't know how I feel about that. I think I would prefer to have still have a fixed allocation, because I did like that they would come to us with some needed projects and we're able to sort of put the town's name on a significant thing each couple of years or term of council.
Through the chair, just a comment in general that, you know, our intention with this was that, you know, the hospital would never be precluded from applying each year. And even at the beginning of council coming with a proposal that would take up that, you know, annual allocation for 4 years, right? If they wanted a large figure like $300,000 or $400,000. But I think our, you know, over the years, making sure that we do get other asks, right? And I think that's the component of this. There are other community organizations, there are big groups, and, you know, there are others, like I'll use Grandview as an example, right? As that, you know, will come to the town with asks. So I think it was our intention was to ensure that it was a competitive process in a way, that there was an incentive for the hospital to put the application in and kind of really make a case of why that's important to be funded and what the community benefit is. But that was initially kind of our thought. But it certainly was never to preclude the hospital for what that's worth. But I appreciate the comment.
Well, I think the intent was the hospital benefits everybody at one point or another in their lives, whether it's the start or the end or all the way along in the middle when things happen. And it was a way of putting money into the community that ultimately benefits everybody. And we can support individual events, but really, if you don't go to that thing in the Metrolinx parking lot over that weekend or whenever it was, you're not going to benefit from it technically. So I think that was sort of the intent. Before I move anything, I want to hear what my colleagues have to say about that, but I feel pretty strongly that I think we should continue with that. I agree with what you say about about Grandview and other large ones, but that brings me to my next question about the approvals. And I don't know, as a member of council, if I want to be the approval body. Having something come to us for over $10,000, I don't want to be lobbied. I don't want to be criticized over what we choose to approve and not approve. And I don't want to have the backlash if we don't approve something because by the people that are putting that on. So I think that needs a little bit more work, that part. And again, I want to hear what my colleagues have to say. I see some nods, but I don't think that I want to be part of the approving body for any of these. I would suggest maybe we look at forming a citizens committee or some sort of ad hoc committee, or even SMT perhaps, or something other. But I think putting that on council would open us up to criticism and lobbying, which is not what I want. I don't know what my colleagues want. Finally, when it comes to the scoring, you said under 10,000 would be through the PSA office, which I imagine is you as the senior grants and strategic initiatives person. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the ultimate, we haven't ironed out exactly who that might be. The intention when we say PSA would really be at the staff level. That might be the CAO, that might be a senior management decision. I don't believe it would just be me arbitrarily determining or granting something up to at a value of $10,000.
Okay. And through the chair, I just want to add that is just for in-year requests. That was not for all requests under 10,000. That was just for in-year ones.
Okay. And thank you for adding that. I guess when we go through the scoring process, whatever that may be, once this gets hammered out a little bit more, I just want to ensure that you said it has to be Ajax centric, I guess, but part of the scoring mechanism, since this, I imagine people are going to be really applying a lot for this now that we have a official grant program where we didn't have a grant program before, that part of the scoring gives something to that if the organizers are an Ajax based versus, and I'll use it just because you brought it up, the food truck one, which was a Peel thing that came and did an event here. If we had two like organizations and one is headquartered in Ajax and one is not, I hope that that would form part of the scoring mechanism in the application process.
Through the chair, absolutely. That's something we're very supportive of when we develop the scoring matrix, which again, our intention is to be fairly transparent on that. So that will be, we'll make sure council gets a chance to see that once we put it in place.
Okay, and finally, just the funding for this, is it still going to come from our slots revenues, or are we just going to build this in as part of our operating per year?
Through the chair, the intention at this time is to use slots. And if there were to become a time where that was no longer feasible, we would have further discussions about that at that time.
Okay. Appreciate the answers. I won't move anything now. I want to hear what my colleagues have to say. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cristiano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next up, we have Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thank you for this report. Thank you for all the hard work that's been put into this new look. I guess the thing that I found with impact in the past is that communities were not able to do a repeat of an event, even if it was extremely successful. So in order for them to apply for more funding in the past, the event would have to change its look, which was limiting to people, especially programs like Black History Month. I mean, you don't change Black History Month. It is what it is, right? But they were unable to apply for any grants. So I'm assuming, I did not read anywhere that that was a limitation in repeat funding. Is that correct?
But through the chair, that's correct. At this point in time, our intention is not to, stop funding something just because it's a repeat. To your point, Regional Councillor Crawford, if it works and it's successful, they have just as good a chance of being approved as they did the year before. So it'll be assessed individually each year, but they won't be precluded from applying if it's the same event.
Excellent. I really like that change. I also want to just confirm that organizations like Ajax Pickering Road Watch will not be put into this program where they have to apply for funding every year. They've never done it before. I think it's funded separately. I just want to confirm that.
Through the chair, that's a great question. Thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. So the intention is not to have folks lose any funding that's been committed. Roadwatch does provide services for us each year. That's one of the ongoing questions of how we will look at those kind of service-based organizations. Roadwatch Para does the same. That agreement's out of fire. Roadwatch is out of transportation. We need to kind of figure out, there are some nuances to that, right? So Roadwatch gets some funds, I believe, for specific initiatives that they'd like to do, is my understanding. So I think initially the intention was that the existing agreements would run their course and then organizations would be asked to apply. But where there are services being completed for the town, they'll definitely be looked at. And that would be something we do, closely working with the organizations to ensure nobody's caught off guard, and that, if it's worked for a long time, the intention of this program is not to throw a wrench into the way that these organizations do business. So, I know that's not a great straight answer at this point in time, but I do commit to looking at that, and we'll make sure that we'll keep you in contact as we go down that road.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to say, as I understand it, the Pickering and Ajax kind of share the funding for that organization. Pickering gives them $2,500, we give them $2,500, and then they work their program throughout the year. That's just, they had to go through some changes by getting insurance and going through a different procedure under this this last term, and they've met all of those qualifications. So yeah, just I would really, if anything changes, I'd like to hear it from us and not them, because I go to every meeting, so I don't really want to hear any changes from them first.
Through the chair, it's Christy again. I just wanted to mention that something like road watch, we know that traffic and speeding is a priority of council. So that, like, those initiatives are not going to change. Or if we know that there's a council position on a specific support, like for instance, para, we know that council has directed us to support that. And until there's a change, we would not arbitrarily make that change. We do continue seeing that support continue, but just support under this umbrella so it can be tracked appropriately.
Okay, that's great. That's awesome. I think Mayor Collier touched on something that I think is really important, and that is whatever committee that is kind of overseeing the funding, that at least a citizen, if not two citizens, should be involved in that process, so that it doesn't seem to be, so there's transparency in the process itself. I agree. I initially was thinking that maybe there could be a rotation of a council member on the committee, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to happen at all. I think that but I do think it's important that we have a resident of Ajax be kind of on that committee. I would agree that would be a really good thing if it can work. I also agree with continuing the funding to the hospital. I think we should be really good neighbors when we've got a hospital in our community to be able to help them fund big projects. I mean, maybe not every year they have a big project. I don't really know, but to have that money set aside so that if they come to us with a need for, some big piece of equipment, that we would be able to say, yeah, that's yours, kind of thing. So those are just my comments. Again, thank you very much. I know that this is probably going to be a process that continues to evolve over time, and I do appreciate the new eyes on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Regional Councillor Crawford. Next up, we have Regional Councillor Dyes.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Crawford's correct. It is something that's evolving constantly. And going back to when Impact came about, and I think that Impact is actually a very, very well-known program, and its name is very well-known and well-received in the community. But it took a lot of work, and it was thoroughly vetted. And it came about through community consultations, actually specifically neighborhoods within our wards after an election. And we heard what the concerns were in the neighborhoods. And we drafted this Impact Ajax to build community. So it also funded small events in a neighborhood if, say, somebody wanted to do a barbecue and meet your neighbors or a street sale, that kind of thing. So it was all about community building, which I think now more than ever is so important coming out of COVID, and everybody's really looking forward to specific events. So I'm hoping that we see more of that as we go through this summer and next year. But I agree with the mayor with respect to the fixed allocation for the hospital, and also agree that you don't want an approving body for a grant process that is political. I don't think that's a great idea. We've always, counted on staff who have vetted all of the applications through Impact Ajax to make the appropriate decisions. With respect, though, to program eligibility and the scoring mix, how come there's no scoring included in this report?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes. So we do have a draft scoring matrix, but we weren't, it wasn't in a final stage. I think there were still some tweaks that we wanted to make to it. And rather than set expectations with the community or people that might be watching this publicly, we didn't want to make that public at this point in time, but the intention will be, once the scoring matrix is designed, that it would be made public for folks to reference when putting together their applications.
Well, I think it's really important in making the decision on these changes today. For example, are you going to look at their financial statements when you're making a decision? Are they going to have to show us that they actually do need that money?
Through the chair, in some, I think previously that was a really big component where we were funding organizations that showed the need. And I think for us, there may be some cases where an organization that is looking to do something above and beyond their normal work that they might be funded to do. We just didn't want to preclude organizations that have some financial security from applying for this program, because the objectives are shifted a little bit to be a bit more beneficial to and in line with the town's objectives. So we didn't want to make that a core, you only get funding if you can show a financial need. But what we will do is ensure that financial due diligence is completed to make sure that we're not funding organizations that are going to use the funds inappropriately or have bad track records, or that kind of due diligence we will still be looking to complete.
Well, I think that's really important. I don't agree, quite frankly, that you are going to include a for-profit organization or business, because I don't know how I'm going to explain that to my constituents here, that Ajax is supporting for-profit organizations. And certainly if they're for-profit, they have, that will show in their financial statements as well. So again, I think it's really important that we have a look at what the criteria is going to be and how this is going to work. It's very important.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, thank you for the comment. I would just add that the intent of using for-profit organizations as being eligible for this, using a couple of examples. The town is partnering with a lexicon group to put in a pool cover over the ACC pool, for example, to decrease our utility costs of heating it and, losing the chemical evaporation in the pool. So a lexicon group being a for-profit entity, because they needed one municipality to kind of adopt this program that has great benefits, they came to us to look to partner with us. And they were a for-profit entity, but that was something that, we will jointly be speaking about together.
I don't see that as a grant issue. I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought the purpose of this grant proposal here, and it's like an impact Ajax, and yes, you're changing it somewhat, but it's supposed to benefit the organizations and not-for-profits in our community and benefit our community as a whole. That to me sounds more like an operational cost or capital cost, if you want to look at it that way, as to something that the town is doing with respect to climate change.
Through the chair, and I think that might be where one of the shifts is maybe taking place with this new proposal, because what we've envisioned is using it more as a mechanism for partnership to benefit the community. So whereas not-for-profits and charities are still eligible, and those really great initiatives that happen will still be eligible and fundable, there are other pieces of community development. Another example would be in 2020 when we partnered with Plastiglass to do those garden giveaway planters, where the town paid for, we used ARC, the parking lot, and we had staff out there. Plastiglass donated the planters, but we paid for the funds or the seeds and the soil in partnership with Arndt's Landscaping. So those are all and Vandermeer's. So those were all private entities that we worked with to create something for the community. So with that, we'd be, that has a community benefit, but those are for-profit organizations. So I think for us, it's not limiting the eligibility and looking at it more as working in partnership with organizations to benefit the community, as opposed to explicitly funding not-for-profits and charities.
So you know that the not-for-profit sector will never be able to compete with that, because now you have a for-profit company who is in line with the municipality. So it's no longer an impact Ajax grant system at all, really. And the whole purpose of this grant system was to allow organizations to implement, maybe they needed seed money to incorporate as a not-for-profit. It was to allow them to grow and work in our community. And I see, it's very different. And I think, again, that's why I'd like to see what program eligibility is in this matrix or this scoring mix that you're looking at, because it's really getting away from what it was intended to be in the first place. And I understand things change and need to, but it's no longer something they'll be able to afford. For example, if you are a not-for-profit organization and you're incorporated as a not-for-profit organization, that is generally the only way you can get any type of grant, small or large. So not-for-profits that are not incorporated, the Impact Ajax help them do, raise money for something or help them do an event for the community. So I'm not sure, where this is going until I really see that scoring mix. I think the other thing the mayor touched on was the Endowment Fund. So that is an investment in money that makes money for us. And I would like to really confirm that, yes, that will go forward, because that was also a source that benefited our community in a different way.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dyes, thank you for the comments. And I do just want to reiterate that if there is a not-for-profit or charitable organization that is important to us, it's important to the town, they do amazing work that, we know has a tangible community benefit, we intend to continue to provide them that seed funding. This is not to take away from that. And again, the any partnership or granting that will take place is there to ensure that the fundamental line is that we're improving the community, and we know that those not-for-profits do a really great job. So appreciate that point being taken, and if there's the feedback that we want to make sure that the increased eligibility for for-profit organizations doesn't put so to speak, the smaller guys or the not-for-profits at risk. I think that's a really important point that we can take back and try to bake into the further development of this.
Well, I'd appreciate that. And again, I think, you need to look at their finances, because there are some very well-off not-for-profit organizations as well. But, and the other thing, I think all departments need to vet it. So once you have your list of requests, I think it should be vetted by all departments, because some pick up on some things that others will not. I appreciate the work that's gone into this. But again, I think I think we have to be very, very cautious moving forward as to eligibility and how we do that. So I'm hoping that you will come back with that or update council on that as we go forward and include those things that we've spoken about. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Next up, we have Regional Councillor Sterling Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just two things. Oshawa, for example, do they give a grant to their hospital? As far as you know, Cassandra?
Through the chair, I'm not sure actually, but we can certainly find that out if that's helpful.
It is only because I object to giving grants to the hospital, not because I don't think the hospital is a worthy institution. Obviously it is, but realistically, that's just the province downloading costs to the municipality. And then the hospital asking the municipality for money, but realistically, it should be the province's responsibility. So I'm curious if we are one of the only municipalities who gives a grant to the hospital, or whether this is common practice. And I mean specifically through the municipality, not through a mayor's gala or something. So if you could follow up on that, that'd be great. My point ultimately was just very similar to the mayor, and I think everyone else who's spoken. This should not be a political process. I'm very happy giving delegated authority to whatever group makes this decision. I think Yeah, I don't want, it's not that I'm trying to absolve myself of the responsibility. Happy to see the report afterwards and give feedback based on reports, but I don't want to be, I don't want people to think this is a quick way to get the organization money going directly to councillors, and petitioning councillors. So I'm just going to echo that thought. But definitely please let us know on the grant, because again, our province should be funding our hospitals. I think that's a very reasonable expectation. And if that's not happening, then that's some advocacy work we could be doing instead. So thank you very much. And thank you, Chair, for the questions.
Thank you so much. Mayor Collier, did you have something you wanted to add to this at this point? I think we're done with questions, correct? Any other questions on 6.1? Sorry. Sorry. Sir, Mr. Mayor, if you may, that was my mistake. Councillor Khan has a question, and then I'll finish up with you. Yep. Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Cristiano, I just wanted to, in a nutshell, how the process goes. Is it an ongoing application people could go through for the entire year? Or is there like a cutoff period of time when everybody submits their application and it's processed to be awarded?
Through the chair to Councillor Khan, thank you for the question. The intent is that this will be a one-time intake. So it's a little wonky this year because of the election timing, but using next year for an example. So 2023, there would be a window of 6 weeks open in August of 2023. That period of time would be used for folks to submit applications for projects in 2024. However, we know that there's organizations that, things happen, things come up. There will be a mechanism for them to submit an in-year request in 2024 if that's the case. So it would be a one intake in 1 year for the following year. And then any in-year requests would follow a separate process, but all still be reported to council.
Great, thank you. The reason I asked that, I served on the Ajax Community Funds Grants Task Force for about 6 or 7 years with a bunch of like-minded people. And that's what we did. We had a period of time we submitted applications, and we spent weeks going through all these applications and picking out the ones that we think that were qualified, the 10 or 20. And it was painstaking work. And I think I was there through providing through a diversity lens, because a lot of these people that applied for grants, I kind of, especially with my industry that I work with, I kind of knew the background. If it was people were just opening organizations just for the grant, close it, and then reopen back the next year. And I knew these people. I was able to veto them. Again, like my colleague said, I will not, support this being something from a political standpoint. We need to stay out of this and have people handle this independently and keep us out of this one, because it can get tricky and a lot of finger pointing. So, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Mayor Collier, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I think I'm fine moving the item as is. I think that the recommendations are fairly broad, and that we're authorizing to implement the giving program, that we're going to direct a corporate giving reserve policy be brought forth, the appropriate staff committee. I would just suggest senior management team. I don't know that we have to amend to do that. I think we can probably make that through just a friendly. CEO Baker, what do you think?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hearing all of the comments, it's obviously council's desire that any reporting not actually come through council for approval, but it definitely makes sense for me, having looked into the different processes. I do think there needs to be some oversight, and also to Regional Councillor Dye's comments about all departments being involved. When the initial intake is completed, it was going to be reported to council for approval. That report can go to the senior management team for approval. And I think that would accomplish, it would tick off both those boxes. So I think that's a reasonable amendment to the process.
Okay. So given that, I would just, if you want that to be an amendment, we can just say to SMT. Council Directing Committee giving reserve policy brought forth to the appropriate staff committee instead of appropriate staff committee to SMT, and just leave it at that.
Ms. Moore, you're good with that?
If I could jump in here, Chair. So I think maybe.
Sorry.
Oh, pardon me.
Director Cooper, I should have directed that to you. I apologize.
Oh, that's fine. We're just double teaming it today. So I think maybe the appropriate place to insert that might be as an amendment to clause 1. So council authorized staff to implement the proposed corporate giving program for launch in November 22. With the adjustment that the approval authority for grants be an internal committee rather than council, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I don't even know that we really need that. I think staff has been given enough direction, so I was actually just fine leaving it as is.
Sure. If we want to just leave the recommendation as is, it is worded pretty broadly, and we'll just make sure we capture that direction in the minutes so that there's a record of it.
That suffice.
It's moved as is, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. We have a question from Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you. Just make it quick. I wondered if it's possible to have this come back after a year of its initiation and for an update on how it's working.
Through the chair, so staff would be happy to report back on an update once it's a year, to given the big change in the program. Absolutely.
Okay. If that's all, Mayor Collier has moved this. Can we have all in favor? Sorry, I should say. Okay, that carries. Thanks so much. I suppose we need a recess at some point, but maybe do we want, I guess I'm the chair, we can do it now, or we can go through. I have a feeling the next one's going to be quite long. Does everybody want to take 5 minutes right now? Is that okay? Good. All right, so we'll take a 5-minute recess. Let's say, 5 minutes. Does that suffice for everyone? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Silent. We will switch over to the live stream. Mr. Chair, we are back on the air.
Okay, welcome everybody back to our General Government Committee meeting on this Monday, June 13th, a lovely day, and we're off to presentation 6.2 Recreation Park Master Plan. Mr. Meredith, you have the floor. Director Meredith, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Just waiting for the presentation to come up, and we'll spend the next few moments providing a bit of an overview before I'm sure there's some questions you may have.
Indeed, yes.
Bear with me one moment. We're just having some technical issues.
Just standing by if you're joining us. There we go. Okay. All yours, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. As Council may recall, in December of 2021, staff presented the draft master plan to General Government Committee. It was really sort of the first sort of crack at a number of recommendations that were being made in response to the needs assessment and community consultation that took place in 2019 and 2020. And at the time of that presentation, staff indicated that it was our intent to reach out to the community to solicit feedback. And really that's what we've been doing over the last 4 to 5 months. Since that time, we had provided and presented to General Government Committee the IMO platform that we were intending on unveiling to solicit that feedback. And that feedback, which I will go through in a moment, has helped in terms of providing some of the key recommendations which are part of the master plan that's before you today. Next slide, please. So as Council will recall, really the purpose of the RPMP is to update the 2007 master plan, which sort of represents a 15-year time horizon upon which the prior master plan was approved by Council. And since that time, the vast majority of recommendations have been implemented. In addition to that, obviously the town's experienced significant changes in its demographic. We've got a better understanding as we approach build out on what the future of growth will look like. And we have also identified sort of what some of the community needs are based on the needs assessment that we completed and the community consultation that took place during the prior couple of years. There's a number of recommendations within this plan that are supported with an implementation plan over the next 10 years. And obviously this is something that we'll use as a guideline as we consider and develop our annual capital budget as part of our budget process sort of each year moving forward. Next slide. So since we've completed the presentation back in December of 2021, there's a number of things that staff have done in terms of reaching out, trying to engage the community, and we have received a significant amount of feedback during that time frame. As we developed the IMO page in January or February, it ultimately led us to hosting a public meeting on March 31st. At that point in time, we presented a number of the recommendations that were made within or being made within the draft master plan. And at the same time, we also launched the town's online platform utilizing IMO. So we sort of took individuals through the process, how they could access the information online, how they could download documents and provide their feedback. As part of the IMO page, sort of for the first time, we introduced video and audio clips of a number of concept plans that had been developed to solicit feedback. We'd also provided copies of all reports, all presentations, and linked to any documents for individuals to download. As part of the consultation in April, we did presentations to the Older Adult Steering Committee as well as the town's Accessibility Advisory Committee. We've also established pop-up booths at each of our community centers during the months of April and May to provide information as it relates to the Rec and Parks Master Plan, to answer any questions that people may have, and also to direct them to the online platform and how they could go about providing their comments and feedback. Finally, we did reach out to each of our community groups, Recreation and Culture, that sent out letters, notices, and information as it relates to the promotion of the draft master plan, again, directing them to the online platform and answering any questions and seeking their input based on this draft document. So, as I'll get to in a moment, there were several hundred views, comments, feedback, many of which are attached to the staff report, which have gone into the recommendations that are before you this afternoon. Next page, please. One of the significant changes with respect to this master plan as opposed to previous iterations was the fact that in the past we were dealing with a high growth municipality with much of the growth taking place within a greenfield environment. As we look at the plan now and as the town moves ever closer to build out from a greenfield perspective, the focus has shifted to intensification. So for the next 10 years, it focuses primarily on the downtown, longer term, probably within the uptown, and opportunities to look at how we're utilizing our existing park spaces and if there are abilities to address some of the community needs through the repurposing of some of these neighborhood parks. So there's a fundamental shift from greenfield to existing infrastructure and investments required to our existing facilities and park system. So within the downtown area in particular, obviously there's an emphasis with respect to the Ajax Community Center, St. Andrews, Exeter Park, the Harwood North soccer pitch, and the idea or interest in acquiring additional parkland within the downtown area, which includes sort of the GO node or the MTSA. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned, this is sort of a snapshot of the IMO webpage that individuals visiting the website would be directed to. On the left, you'll see a bit of an overview and connections to the draft master plan itself, as well as conceptual plans that were developed for town facilities, as well as many existing parks. On the right-hand side, provided the opportunity from an interactive perspective for individuals to look at what was being proposed or considered and provide opportunities for feedback on each of those locations or with respect to each of those concept plans. Comments that you'll see attached to the report. So whether they were comments made on IMO, whether they were comments made specific to any of the concept plans that are referenced to the right, have all been captured and have been added as an appendices to the staff report. Next page, please. As I mentioned, there's really three, I guess, significant areas of investment that is identified within the Rec and Parks Master Plan over the 10-year period, specifically the Ajax Community Center, Pickering Village Complex, and the Audley Recreation Center. When we look at, I'll touch upon each of these sort of at a general high level. These areas do represent probably the most significant investments that are being recommended within the master plan. As it relates to the Ajax Community Center, the facility itself, some of the amenities that are identified from a need perspective relate to a new warm water teaching pool, which is identified as number 4, sort of in the green area to the south where the existing pool exists, the introduction of a new gymnasium, and the modernization of the fitness center so that there's a more inviting experience for individuals utilizing this facility. There's also a number of other improvements, some of it equipment related, some of it relating to accessibility, and some of the concerns and issues relating to the accessible nature or lack thereof in certain portions of the Ajax Community Center. And the other really relates to the modernization of a lot of our community rooms, whether it's the HMS Ajax room, any of the community rooms on the second floor, and really making them more attractive for outside rentals, for internal use, the introduction of technology, and so forth. So there's a number of improvements that are identified to modernize the community center and meet the needs of a growing population within downtown Ajax. Next slide, please. Tied into or relating to the Ajax Community Center is a recommendation for the conversion of the north soccer field along Harwood Avenue and the introduction of outdoor recreational amenities to support intensification specifically within the Harwood and Bailey area. And within this community park, there's identified needs for splash pads, basketball courts, skateboard park, playground, and so forth. Again, at a community level, so when we're talking scale, think of skateboard park at the Aldley Recreation Center, splash pad at Rotary Park. So we get an idea in terms of size and scale as to what we would be looking at introducing within this area. As many of you know and have seen, there's, through the case study, projections for upwards of 20,000 people plus sort of within the downtown area over the next, 20 to 30 years. So it's starting to plan and anticipate that increase in residency and ensuring that we have the outdoor spaces that provide opportunities for those future residents. Next slide, please. One of the most, significant comments or discussions that we had throughout the process related to Pickering Village, the need for its redevelopment. As many of you know, whether it's the old village library, the existing arena, or the senior center that currently exists, these are extremely old, outdated facilities in need of essentially replacement. What we've identified from a community perspective is that this is an ideal location and an identified need for a new older adult center. As part of that, also a new gymnasium, group fitness studio. The town will hopefully in 2023 be completing an arts and culture master plan, which should identify any community needs relating to visual arts, performing arts, museums, what have you, that should come out of that report, as well as looking for some multi-use program opportunities for youth and seniors as well. And as part of that, one of the considerations that staff are recommending is that it is an opportunity for a mixed-use development that could blend community uses with higher density residential uses. And by higher density, I mean in the 6 to 8 story range. So part of the proposal is to look at, in the short term, an opportunity to look at an RFP or an expression of interest to find out what community partners and interest there may be with respect to some type of joint venture project on the municipally owned lands. That scenario could come in different shapes and forms and have different arrangements from a contractual standpoint, but it is something that, from a staff perspective, we feel is a priority to move forward and advance as part of a key recommendation within this master plan. Next slide, please. The third facility that is recommending, significant investment as we look at this over a 10-year time frame is the addition of a twinned indoor sports facility, whether that's in the form of a dual ice rink, a single ice rink, replacing the one in the village, plus an indoor turf field or a combination of, an indoor walking track, outdoor skating trail or outdoor skating rink, and obviously formalizing the outdoor event space south of the Audley Rec Center as part of this third phase of development. The way that it's positioned now from a recommendation standpoint and on an implementation, this would probably be towards the latter part of the 10-year implementation plan. Staff have identified and recommend advancing the St. Andrews redevelopment and the ACC renovations and expansions sort of in the nearer term or shorter term as it relates to an investment standpoint. Next slide, please. In addition to the facility investments that I've just talked about, the town's also looking at the existing parks that we have within town, specifically those with underutilized sports fields. So as part of the master planning exercise, we looked at baseball and soccer in particular, looked at utilization rates and how we could accommodate and ensure there is no impact on the growth of those sports, while at the same time identifying opportunities to make better use of some of our existing park space. We know from a resident standpoint, based on some identified gaps that we have within our park system, that additional tennis and pickleball courts, basketball courts, specifically south of Highway 401, additional cricket amenities, whether that's batting cages, turf pitches, smaller splash pads, skateboard spots, leash-free zones, shade structures. Those seem to be front and center in terms of opportunities that residents are looking for. And we do feel that there are opportunities to repurpose existing parks to look at introducing some of these amenities. At the same time, we also look at the redevelopment of our parks through the lens of the needs from those with accessible needs. There's areas and opportunities for improvements there, as well as through our risk and resiliency plan. There's ways and opportunities to address climate change initiatives through some of these park redevelopment opportunities. So our approach in terms of looking at our existing parks, we've identified, I believe there's about a half a dozen neighborhood parks that are worthy of repurposing and reimagining sort of during the 10-year period that'll identify this gap in park infrastructure and at the same time should make these locations more appealing for more community or neighborhood usage by introducing these specific amenities. Next page, please. So there's really about 5 things that I just wanted to highlight in terms of sort of what we heard. There are some one-off comments that you will read within the text and the body of the report itself. But with respect to the overriding sentiment or comment was with respect to Pickering redevelopment, Pickering Village redevelopment. Probably the most comments that we received, not only as it relates to the inclusion of an older adult center, but just the need to replace the existing facilities, how they've degraded to the point where they are not overly functional or usable and will require an investment to maintain them. So it is, from a staff perspective, something that we feel in the shorter term we do need to act on. We've had discussions on this for a long period of time, and I know whether we're looking at the village or, as I mentioned in the second bullet point here, the investment in an older adult center. A lot of the feedback that we're receiving, that there's been a lot of strategies, a lot of plans, a lot of discussion as it relates to these needs, but there hasn't been much in the way of action or investment over the last number of years. So if I'm passing on comments that we heard from the constituents as we went through the consultation, that was probably what we heard the most. The park repurposing and redevelopment were areas that were well received, specifically as it relates to the introduction of leash-free areas and more leash-free areas within our neighborhood park system. The emerging need or desire for additional cricket infrastructure within our park system beyond just the Ajax Cricket Center at Clements and Monarch. There's general support and excitement for the concept plans that were presented as part of the IMO page and the interest that generated. And then there are just a number of comments that both ourselves in operations and recreation and culture will look at from a day-to-day operational and service level perspective, whether it relates to swim hours, public skating in Shinny, canoe and kayak launching opportunities, sort of along Lake Ontario, additional outdoor rinks, outdoor pools, splash pads, summer camps and playground program expansion where possible, and splash time extensions. Those are just some examples of more operational items, but nonetheless comments that were made that we will be looking at and considering on an annual basis as we move forward with our budgeting process and our service level review processes. So just one more slide, I believe. So really what I wanted to speak to today is, at this point in time, council is not approving any projects as part of this. This is strictly a master plan. This is really a framework document that we, in conjunction with council, will look at implementing over the next 10 years. The recommendations, we will look at from a staff perspective on an annual basis. We'll look to feed our 10-year capital forecast with respect to the implementation of many of these recommendations, many of which are already within the 10-year time horizon. And it also provides an opportunity with a new term of council in the early part of 2023, allows us to, through the strategic planning process, identify priorities for the next term of council and then beyond. So it is really a guiding document. It is a framework for moving forward. And it's something that we will continue to monitor. It's something that we will continue to update throughout the 10-year life of the plan. Nothing stays static over that 10-year period. Things may change. Opportunities may present themselves that allow us to consider various recommendations within this plan. So it is something that will be a lively document that gets referenced sort of as we move forward. And as I mentioned, we look forward to those discussions, and council will have the opportunity to approve projects on a project by project basis through the budget process. And like I say, establishing their priorities during the next term of council. So with that, I will conclude and open it up to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Meredith, for that vast presentation on a vast subject. First on the speakers list, we have Mayor Collier.
There we go. Unmute. Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Meredith, and thank you for the presentation. And I'm really glad to see this come forward. I mean, we, thinking back, deferred a number of capital items in 2020 budget, I think it was, pending the release of this document to make sure we were going down the right road before we made those decisions. I have a few questions, and I want to start with going to the chart on page 103 of the agenda today. I don't know what it is in the thing, but 103 is a chart with the different class and projects and timeframes. And I just want to go through because I'm a little bit concerned. And in your presentation, Mr. Meredith, you're 32 of 33. So your second last slide spoke to the seniors and the needs and the older adult center and the importance and the feedback you received on those. But when I look at this chart on page 103 of the agenda, I don't see those important comments from slide 32 of your presentation or our older adults study or plan reflected in the timeline. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. So Ajax Community Center renovation design is in the short range, and then $40 million for the construction. Mixed use Pickering Village redevelopment is not, it's a no, identified in the 10-year capital forecast. Can you please speak to, well, just go up one, Audley Recreation Center Phase 3 construction, which you speak to in the report as needing the ice pads. Just to recap, last year, we opened our ice pads based on having permits from Ajax Minor Hockey Association. And Ajax Minor Hockey Association pulled their permits and left us kind of holding the bag with having the cost of preparing all the ice and getting everything ready to go, and then not taking what they'd agreed to. And I understand they have partnered now with Pickering. So based on some of these things that have happened, I think since we started this process, some changes, how are those going to be reflected? Like, I don't know whether we necessarily need Phase 3 ice pads at Audley Rec Center based on current information. But I do know that we need that older adult center that's been designated at the Village Arena site. So can you just speak to that in timing, please?
Sure. With respect to the village, the way that we've positioned it, and I think the discussions that we've had, is our desire to move forward with it as a mixed-use development, hopefully public-private partner relationship that we would develop. In our mind, that's pretty much a top priority that we would look to see in the early part of 23. If you look under 2.0 under plan studies, where we mentioned Pickering Village redevelopment RFP, it's the second item under the artificial turf business plan that identifies sort of as really as a priority that we would look forward to developing that draft document, that expression of interest, and early in 23 sort of advance discussions, see what interest there is and what opportunities there are to develop that partnership. Again, this is just, an estimated timelines. If that takes a year or two, there's a couple of things that we have to understand. If we're going to move forward with a mixed-use development, we have to look at the existing zoning on the property. There may be some pre-zoning work that we need to do in advance to ready the site for development. So even if we got it on the street at the beginning of 23, we worked with and evaluated proposals through 23. And at the same time and concurrently, we dealt with the necessarily planning approvals. We're probably into a 2-year time frame or process, which would lead us into 2024 or 2025, which is why I put the construction in that 25-27. It doesn't mean it could move forward. That would really just be dependent on the process that we would follow. So it's intended to be and recognize the priority status that I had mentioned and I think you had referenced, and the process will move as quickly as it can. But that's sort of an estimated timeline and process that has been laid out and identified here. What I would also say with respect to your question on ICE, you are correct as it relates to Ajax and Pickering and Boys and how they have combined. And what I will say is that within this master plan, for the first time, the master plans in the past had always predicated itself on the fact that you needed to build Phase 3 of ARC first before you could take the Village Arena offline. For the first time, this master plan doesn't say that. This master plan says that based on demand and need, there may be the ability to shut down the Village ice rink in advance of Phase 3 of ARC and look at redeveloping Pickering Village based on the community needs that are identified within that report. So I think it's recognizing exactly what you're saying, is that the demand has declined as it relates to ice, and that over the next year or so, Recreation and Culture will continue to monitor that demand and monitor ice usage and see what the town looks like with just 4 pads as opposed to 5. We then have another 5, 6, 7 years to assess ice usage. And at that point in time, as we start to think about the Phase 3 of ARC, whether that's in 2027, 2028, 2029, we'll have an understanding of the community need as it relates to ice. Is there 1 additional pad required? Is there the demand for 2 additional pads, or are there any need for additional pads, and are the 4 at the Ajax Community Center appropriate? So I think the plan's been positioned to adapt to that change. It recognizes Pickering Village as a priority, and it allows us to respond to the changing ice usage or needs over time and assess that demand.
Okay, so I appreciate that explanation, but I'm wondering, so if council approves this today, how locked in locked in are we to the schedule? For instance, Ajax Community Center renovation design, 2022 to 2024, which means it could start immediately. I'm not convinced that that is our highest priority project. I don't even know that that's our second highest or third for that matter. I would rank the Pickering Village and the Senior Center higher. So how does that factor in? Just because it's already in the 10-year capital forecast, given this new plan that we're just looking to approve today, I don't know that those timeframes still align. So are we locking in, or do we still have the flexibility to make changes?
I can assure council you're not locking into any of these timeframes. So the only real formality is the budget process. When your 2023 projects are approved, that essentially is the only approval that we as staff have on an annual basis. This is sort of a framework that we will make reference to when we're looking at ACC. There's factors that we will look at as it relates to how much growth are we experiencing in the downtown area in terms of the changing need or demand within that area? What's our affordability factor, right? So within each of these projects, we also have to look at funding sources and our ability to fund each of these projects. Right. So some of them, as you know, have different funding sources. So which ones are competing with each other so that we can provide council the information that they need to make the right decisions that they see fit. So council is not tying themselves to these timelines sort of in any way. This is sort of a ballpark or a framework. We will assess each of these sort of projects on an annual basis. As I mentioned in the presentation, things are going to change during the course of the plan, and we'll need to adapt. And there may be certain projects that we're sort of thinking that are midterm that might be higher priorities that council provides direction that they want to accommodate next year. There may be something in 2024 that, maybe it's a longer term project and it's not short term. So that flexibility is built into the implementation of the plan.
Okay. Well, I feel better after hearing that explanation. I don't recall off the top of my head, and it's going to take too long to go back and look at the budget. Of these blue in 2022-2024, Ajax Community Center renovation, Pickering Village redevelopment RFP, St. Andrews Community Center expansion feasibility, Rotary Park feasibility study, all those, which have been approved right now? Do you know?
So the only ones that have been approved are really those that are in construction this year in 2022. So of those, you've got the cricket field that's under construction. We've got St. Andrews, where we've got the pickleball courts and the playground. And I think in the parks, we've got Mulberry Park that we've just awarded sort of earlier today at General Government Committee. So those are the only ones in theory that have been approved. The other ones that say yes under the identified in 10-year forecast, I mean, those projects are in the forecast now. But again, they only get approved sort of 1 year out in terms of them being a project. So all it's saying is those are the dollar values, and it's identifying that those projects are in the 10-year forecast at this point in time.
Okay. I'm going to go back and have a look and just see what studies that we have approved after the meeting. But okay. I will just give my thoughts that I think we really have to have a very seniors focus, we call them older adults focus on our capital projects before we start looking at Rotary Park feasibility studies and fixing parks that already exist and that type of thing. I think we've been promising them results for quite some time based on the outcome of this study. And in my mind, and I'm telling you, they're expecting it. Mm-hmm. The Probus clubs never hesitate to be asking me, where are we on this? Where are we on this center? And they're expecting now that this is done, that there be some results pretty quick. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. And I'm going to be looking, hopefully that those take priority over some of these other things that I see who are already in the capital, but I don't see as high as a priority. I guess I'll listen to what my councillors see if they concur or not. Thank you very much. I appreciate the delegation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Next up, we have Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Director Meredith. I guess I think we probably have more older adults at this point in this town. I know this council is not getting any younger than we have ice users as far as hockey. But now I'm no expert in that area whatsoever, so I don't want to diminish the need for ice time at all. But I think that we need to have a greater focus on our older adults and providing for them in a way that honors them and they have a place that they can actually meet together. But I guess my concern, one of my questions around the village, and I know it's just a concept. I understand that there's no site plans, there's no anything. It's just this idea. Is the size of the buildings talked about going in? You're saying between 4 and 6. That would include all the levels of those buildings, being that there would be like a gym or a senior center. So then 4 residential high. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I had discussions with Director Romanowski, and we're generally looking at the 6-story in terms of what's in keeping with the official plan, right? So that's what we sort of first and foremost. So we felt that 6 stories was the relative building height that we would be looking at, sort of from a building height perspective. And you are correct. That would be 1 or 2 stories of community uses with probably 4 stories of residential above, whether there's some personal service, health-related services that could be provided on the ground floor is something to be considered as well. But that's correct. It's sort of 2 and 4 was sort of what we were looking at.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of luck with adding residential in the village. We've had one that's now for sale and one that's got been stalled a bit. So it would be nice to have a success story. I guess what worries me is that a developer comes in and says, oops, we can't make any money with 4 stories, so we have to add 25, so like, I'm just hoping that we don't get into that kind of rezoning ask again, because that seems to be kind of typical in some of the infills that we're looking at. Because I think as much as the village needs an overhaul and needs a redesign, it needs to stay in the keeping of what the village is. And that's why I really, really hope that we can find a developer that can appreciate the uniqueness of this particular area. But anyway, those are just my comments. And I do appreciate that this is a lot of work. And I know that there's limited amount of money and a lot of need my goodness, the Ajax Community Center needs an overhaul. More than words can probably put it, anyone can actually say. It needs help in its accessibility areas. There's a lot of things that could be put into the Ajax Community Center. And certainly ARC is really the pride of Ajax. It's got so many great features, and we still want to continue to be able to build on all of those areas. And we realize like money is limited. So I appreciate the fact that you brought this forward to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. Next up, we have Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree with Mayor Collier that there should be a bit of a seniors focus. I think we'd also be remiss to not acknowledge the differences in demographics of the different wards. For example, Ward 2, we absolutely have our share of seniors, but we have predominantly new families. And so I'm sure I speak for Councillor Collier myself when I say that the new capital projects we're supporting focus towards, the new families coming to Ward 2. So the ice rink, the ice trail, all sound like really cool ideas for us. One point I did want to bring up though was, and I thought this would be covered in the master plan, was almost the theme for new infrastructure. And so what I mean by that is, if we build a new building, whether it's a community center or an add-on or anything like that, I think it'd be a great opportunity to now suddenly reflect our Indigenous and BIPOC populations through history, through art. And I'd love to kind of see, I thought this would include master plan, but just a strategy to not just have a community center with just a building, but just like a thematic community center that can finally pay homage to the various contributions of the racialized community, especially the Indigenous community and the Black community, and their contributions to Ajax and Canada and Ontario. So that's more, I guess, just a comment. But we only have so many more buildings left to build in Ajax, and this is going out very long term. But I just want to, I hope staff is really considering that aspect of it, to not just build a building, but to build a theme, to build a story to these buildings that reflect our community and that our community can visit and acknowledge the history that came before us. So hopefully that can be considered. So thank you very much, Chair, for the comments.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Lee. Next up,
I just wanted to.
Oh, so sorry.
To Regional Councillor Lee, I know in 2023, and I believe Mr. Gruber and Mr. Vita are on the line as well, but there are plans to update the town's arts and culture master plan. And that is looking at, and will look at, our facilities. It will look at our parks and open space system and what are those opportunities to tell those stories that I believe you're just referencing. So I think that is a great opportunity. And again, Robert or Chris, I don't know if you're on the line and want to add in on that, but I do share the comments that you've just referenced and explain why you may not see those specific recommendations within this plan.
Yeah, through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee. Yeah, I would second Dave's Director Meredith's comments there in terms of the intent of the culture plan for which we'll be submitting for capital consideration for 2023. I think that plan will help speak to how we incorporate arts and culture not only in any of these new facilities and structures that we're building, but also into our existing buildings where we're incorporating those elements already, where we can expand them, how we can ensure our spaces are as best reflective of the community in the history for which it represents. So that would absolutely be one of the end goals of that study.
So I would just like staff then to remind us come budget time, because realistically, these plans are always the first ones cut during a budget time when we start discussing what needs to have, needs to have versus wants to have. In this case, I think we've crossed over to the point where the town of Ajax needs to have this. Again, I'm not sure if my colleagues share this point of view, but during budget time, I'm looking forward to conversations with both of you, either of you, just reiterating the importance of the cultural plan and its impact on stuff like buildings. So thank you, Mr. Vita and Meredith, for chiming in.
Okay, any other comments to Regional Councillor Lee? I don't see any. Next on the speakers list is Councillor Khan, and then I have Regional Councillor Dice. You have the floor, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to bring to attention 4.0 on page 104. There is a slew of poetic, beautiful words. It goes like additional cricket pitch in North Ajax. Yes, $190,000. Can you elaborate on where this will be located? It's great news for me. I just want to know if you can give me some more information on this project, please.
So there's a couple of things that, from a staff perspective, we're doing over the course of this year is, now that we've identified and gone through the master plan, we can identify those parks or sports fields that we can consider surplus, right? So there could be ball diamonds that are underutilized that present opportunities. So whether we can look at Imagination, we can look at Forest Ridge, we can look at, Westney Heights, like there's a number of parks that are identified for repurposing that We're talking probably more youth-based, so younger, because it's going to be difficult to get the full space required for full adult competitive field. But our focus is on youth opportunities and how to introduce, like I say, whether it is wickets, whether it's batting cages, whether it's infrastructure in multiple locations. So we're going to be doing that over the course of this summer to see what those opportunities are best represented, so that when we do the capital budget for 2023, we'll be able to be more specific. So we're going through that analysis process right now.
Oh, good. Again, so you don't need a full-fledged cricket field. We already have the one in South Ajax, the Ajax Cricket Club. We just need the little pitches. You don't have to have the whole full-fledged batting cage. We spoke about this before. Just a cricket pitch in an area that they can play, right? Whenever, like for youth, etc. And were you thinking, Director Meredith, putting like multiple pitches and like Imagination and like there's, like in Ravenscroft, that area, it's all like very far apart. So, or are you just looking at one? Because the amount of money allocated there, I don't know how much you're looking to invest in and how many actually you're looking to put.
What we will do is we've started to establish pretty good relationships with a number of members of the community as it relates to cricket, right? Whether it's associations or individuals, we've had conversations with family members. So it's really trying to get cricket introduced for, father, daughter, and son who want to go and just like you can with baseball or soccer or any other sport, you can go to a neighborhood park and participate and be active. So it's really to provide those opportunities within our park system. So could there be 2 or 3 locations? Absolutely, right? So we will specify it and be clear in terms of the scope of work and sort of those locations within our capital budgeting process.
Good. Just wanted to clarify that you don't need it all. You didn't need all the batting cages and all the fancy equipment, just a piece of grass and a cricket pitch that you play, right? And even the pitch itself is not even necessary, right? We just play on the grass.
Well, you could do a small, like a bit of an artificial, some of it's just an artificial turf and a wicket, right? That you could just put in a neighborhood park that people could play and utilize.
I didn't want you to feel restricted from putting in all the extra amenities. That's not necessary. Yep. All right. Thank you. Next question, Mr. Chair, would be about the Nottingham Park redevelopment, $660,000. What did you have in mind for Nottingham Park, Director Meredith?
In Nottingham Park, there's a couple of items. When we do sort of radial search of outdoor amenities and what may be appropriate in that area, we've identified potentially a smaller splash pad and a pickleball/tennis court sort of in that area. So those are a couple of amenities plus a small leash-free park, right? So because Nottingham is, it's central to a neighborhood, it's an area where people come together. It's an opportunity where we've got an underutilized soccer field right now to introduce some of those features that we would hope the residents in the area would benefit from.
Okay. Is it always going to be, I've been there 20 years, always going to be Johnny on the spot washroom facilities for residents there, or is there any plans to make something a little more permanent?
There are no plans for washrooms in any of our parks at this point in time.
Okay, just checking. And last, Mr. Chair, with your permission, the Audley Recreation Center Fairgrounds. What do you have in mind for that?
That is an area that we've identified as an opportunity for hosting larger scale community events for, whether it's a Canada Day, whether it's a Rib Fest, whether it's, a number of different community events that could be hosted there. And it's making sure that we've got the appropriate infrastructure in place. So you get food trucks, you get, a large amount of waste that gets generated from these things. You need areas for additional porta potties, bicycle storage, right? We want to promote people coming to these events in bikes. So where would you provide bike storage and security, those types of things? So it's doing all the logistics around setting that site up. Quite often we will have our stage there where there's live performances as well. So where's the best location for that? So whether you've got access off Audley Road, sort of further to the south by the tracks, where you could bring some of those trucks and that in without interfering with the community center itself. So it's just looking through the logistics of how we would set that up to plan for and accommodate future community events. And it takes some of the pressure off some of our other locations, whether it's along the waterfront or what have you, so that it is an opportunity to host those larger scale type of events where you could get 10,000 people there plus and hold them safely.
Thank you. Amazing discussion all around. I'll be sure to share this information with whoever asked. Thank you very much, Director Meredith. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Next, we have Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. If the Arts and Cultural Plan is going to be done in 2023, does that mean it'll be integrated with the Recs and Park Master Plan in 24 and we'll see some initiatives come forward?
That would be our plan and hope, is that we'd be identifying all the community interests that would form part of that redevelopment when we issue or enter into any form of arrangement or agreement with a potential private developer.
So the plan in general, though, will be part of the master plan. It's not going to operate on its own, the rec master plan.
Yeah, they'll work in tandem with one another, where there's the recommendations that are within the master plan itself. I'm sure there's going to be recommendations that come out of the Arts and Culture Master Plan that will deal with the parks and open space system that we will integrate, and then we could bring them together in terms of an implementation plan moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Because I have a comment or question. Any other questions from our council? Just very quickly, because my council colleagues have pretty much covered everything that was in my heart and mind. One thing, just one more point about the seniors, adult living. It seems to be whenever we visit, because oftentimes Regional Councillor Crawford and I will visit, or Mayor Collier, I've been there, Councillor Bauer, those seniors, those adults are there every single day. A lot of them, that's their social family, for their mental health. It's not something they do seasonal. It's not like they go to the gym twice a week or they play hockey in the fall. And again, I'm not suggesting you weren't thinking of that, but just as a little tidbit from me to remember that it's something that for a lot of them, they do on a daily basis. And I think you got the message that it's important. But I also agree with Regional Councillor Lee, that this is a wider scope than just the seniors component, but just wanted to add that. Thank you so much. So I need a mover for this if there's no other questions. Councillor Khan, very good. All in favor? Okay, that carries. Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, or Clerk, I should say, we are now entering into a closed session. Correct.
For the chair, so we'll need a motion to enter into closed session.
I need a mover to enter into closed session. Regional Councillor Dies. All in favor? Thank you so much. That carries. Just waiting on you.
Mr. Chair, we are back in open session.
Thank you so much. I need a mover for the agenda in camera that we just discussed, and that would be Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford. All in favor? That passes. Thank you so much. And I need a mover now for adjournment. All right. Regional Councillor Lee, the only one to put up his hand. I guess the rest of us want to stay here. All in favor? Thanks so much to everyone, and thanks to staff.
Good job, Robbie.
Good job, Rob.